Brandon Bailey again, here to welcome you back to my YouTube channel for another discussion video. This time we're going to be ranking the studio albums of the legendary band from the UK, Led Zeppelin. This is my first act I'm covering on here that comes from across the pond. Probably going to be many more of them in the future. Haven't really done the math on this, but I feel like 50% of my favorite artists are probably UK artists, so don't know how that happened in my life, but I think it goes to say how many great rock bands actually come from there. Great, interesting, unique bands at that. So, I guess we'll get into a little bit of the history on Zeppelin here. I mean, to start, I guess I should say who, doesn't know who they are or, isn't aware of them to some extent, you know? I mean, I feel like a lot of their riffs, their ethos, the image, you know, the logo and all that stuff, all that stuff's, ingrained in pop culture. So regardless of, whether anybody in my family was, into Led Zeppelin or not, I feel like it would have been almost unavoidable for me to have some sort of connection to them in my life. I feel like everybody comes across one of their songs or something at some point, you know, whether it's in school or, in a movie or whatever. You're gonna hear about Zeppelin somehow. I'm not saying that literally everybody in the world knows who they are, but, you know, if you have any sort of a pulse on, pop culture at all, or you care about rock music or anything, you know who Led Zeppelin is, and, they don't need much of an introduction at this point. So, doesn't really say a lot about my personal history. I knew who they were pretty much since I was, a baby, because my, grandfather on my mom's side, it's his favorite band. He's completely obsessed with them, always has been. And I remember he had this Camaro when I was a kid, that had a license plate on it, custom one that just said Led Zepp on it. And, you know, at that point I was not so impressed with them, because I had grown up with alternative rock and the new metal shit that was on the radio, you know, been to the HF festivals. It was my first concert. So if I hadn't taken music history class or anything like that, I probably wouldn't have known much about where a lot of music comes from, even rock music and a lot of popular music that was around when I was a kid. But, you know, to the point I was making, I didn't understand really how important of a band Led Zeppelin was. You know, I just knew my grandfather was super obsessed with them, and that's pretty much how I judged them. I was I don't really understand what the big deal is, you know, he would always show me songs by them, and, you know, just my dumb little kid brain, couldn't comprehend the greatness, I suppose. I was still too into Linkin Park and Rammstein and System of a Down and God only knows what else. But anyway, yeah, so it kind of took me a while. I don't really remember I want to say I was in middle school, 6th or 7th grade or something like that. And my social studies teacher, we were doing a crafts day or something like that. It was some bullshit day. And she had a CD that I don't know was a mix CD or something. It was all classic rock staples from her time, and she was probably the first person I ever met that was a real hippie, my old social studies teacher. And you know, a lot of these songs were from that era of music, and I had never heard that kind of stuff ever before. So I remember Stairway to Heaven was on that CD, and it was the first time that song had ever struck me at any. And I don't even remember if she talked about it at all. I think she just let this CD play for us for whatever reason in middle school, and I just remember that song coming on and me just completely not doing my work, just dropping what I was doing, and having to listen to Stairway to Heaven in full for the first time. I was aware of it in its legendary status, I guess, because my grandfather had kind of shoved that down my throat. Not that that was ever one of his favorite songs. I remember being really little and be can you play Stairway to Heaven? He'd be I don't want to play that song. You don't play Stairway. Obviously I didn't know the Wayne's World joke at that time, so I didn't really understand why it was such a quote-unquote hated song. It's not, but it's just like overrated, I suppose. So anyway, I was in middle school, heard Stairway, got hooked on it immediately, and that was kind of like when I really started listening to all kinds of different music, like no matter what it was, whether it was like what I was listening to at the time, alternative rock or punk or hip-hop or classic rock or techno, you know, dance music, stuff like that, anime fucking music, video game music. Like I was just digesting all kinds of stuff at that age, and yeah, I'm glad I came across like stuff like Stairway to Heaven and stuff back then, because it opened my eyes to like how epic like a song can really be, like in all kinds of meanings there. So move forward a little bit. Pretty much like all of my friends, everyone I knew in school and hung out with, also kind of had like a taste for Zeppelin. They all liked them. Maybe some of them a little more than I did at times, because I was just getting into other music, but they were always still there. And like a lot of those experiences opened me up to some of my first like musical realizations. Like I didn't even know that there was like synth in Kashmir. Like I'd listened to Kashmir a million times on the radio up till my friend pointed out, but he was like, dude, you gotta check out like just what the synths are doing in that. It like completely makes the song. And like I agree, like I never even would have noticed it. Like it just got me to listen to different parts of music a lot more, if that makes sense or anything. So where to go from there? I guess I picked up guitar around the time I was like 15, like pretty seriously, and obviously some of their songs like Stairway and stuff, A Whole Lot of Love, Heartbreaker, were like some of the first songs I ever tried to pick up on the guitar. So they're like, some of them the first that I ever successfully learned how to play all the way through. You know, it's one thing to like learn the riff, but to like learn the whole song like all the way through, solos and the breaks and everything and all, like those were some of the first pieces of music I really analyzed and tried to break down myself, whether it sounded the best or I played them perfectly or not, as kind of besides the point, but they had that impact on me. And especially when I started getting into the history of music, and more particularly like the history of heavy metal and like hard rock music, and you know, there's always that debate, who's the first metal band, Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin. Obviously Led Zeppelin's more of a rock band and Sabbath is the metal godfathers, but one cannot deny, after listening, especially after listening to all these albums, like pretty much every album has a song that you could consider a heavy metal like track on there, like just with the riffing, Robert Plant's freaking like halfway Rob Halford freaking soaring fucking vocal range, like the darkness and gloominess that kind of resides over some of their songs, the mysticism and like kind of medieval sort of like ancient European vibe that they give you on them. Like it all kind of ties into what we associate with traditional heavy metal music at this point. So it makes sense. But if you listen, like, obviously, like, a band that wasn't trying to be, like, the hardest rockin' band of all time wouldn't have done something like The Crunge or Did Maker, maybe, because, like, you know, it's a funk and a reggae song. It's like, I don't think a band that was focused on being the heaviest band in the world would have gone so far to experiment in other genres. Whereas you look at Black Sabbath, I know we're not talking about Sabbath today, but it's pretty clear why they are seen as the predecessors to heavy metal, because they never strayed too far from that, like whereas Zeppelin does all kinds of different stuff. Anyway, so yeah, pretty impactful to me at that point. Any of those bands that were considered like proto-metal bands or the original hard rock bands, like they've always kind of been beloved by me, and I think a lot of other metalheads. So yeah, it's pretty easy to see why I've been attached to them for a while. I was in a band called Altrum with this other Brandon that I know in there, and he was always obsessed with Led Zeppelin. Him and my friend Kevin, who was also in that band. Actually, pretty much everybody in that band was all obsessed with Zeppelin, but Brandon and Kevin were like the big ones, and like I just remember them having all these bootlegs and shit, and that's really what did it for me. Like I always loved Zeppelin, but I didn't watch their shows or, you know, listen to the demos or do any of that stuff, like get into the history of the band and who they were as people and, you know, how they progressed. And they really helped open the doors to that for me. And, yeah, obviously got me a little more obsessed with particular songs from watching, you know, Royal Albert Hall or Nebworth or The Song Remains the Same, you know, Madison Square Garden concerts. A lot of their stuff, you know, the live stuff, it gets you hooked in. Once you start watching the Zeppelin fucking shows, you know, you're hooked for life. So, yeah, they've always been a big impact on me. Never stopped listening to Zeppelin. Always play their music. Always learning new songs by them. So, you know, what else can I say? One of the, you know, without giving too much away about my rankings here, what else can I say other than they're like a legendary band that deserves all the credit that they get? You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to deny any of their greatness or impact. I mean, regardless of what you might say about them being like derivative, and especially in their first few albums, maybe stealing songs from the blues and blues artists, I kind of disagree with that being a bad takeaway from them, because lots of bands were like doing traditional like covers or putting their own spin, especially British rock bands. I don't get the whole cultural appropriation thing of it. I think that they were just trying to put their own spin on it. I don't think that there's anything remotely racist or harmful or anything about what they were doing. I think if you attach that to them, that's your own personal problem. So I think you need to work on that yourself. Anyway, not to get into too much of that here, we're talking about the material on the albums, the way they sound, and my personal enjoyment of them, not your personal enjoyment of them. That's for you to put below in the comments, which I would like to see more of your guys' rankings and stuff on there. I know there's some people leaving comments and stuff, but I would personally like to see your lists. Like, if you could just list out your songs, your albums, that'd be cool. That's how we get these things started, because how am I to know how you disagree with me or not, you know? Anyway, so this list is already going to start off controversial, and I know some people might agree with me on this probably off the bat. I've seen enough Zeppelin ranking videos to know this, but at the bottom, number 8, I'm not including Coda, by the way. I know some of you watching the Nirvana video might be like, oh my god, you included Incesticide, but you're not gonna include Coda on the Zeppelin video. Nirvana has 3 albums. They deserved a 4th. Zeppelin, while 8 still might not be a whole hell of a lot, just adding the 9th just felt like I just didn't need to do it. I just felt like I didn't really need to add it. It doesn't feel like a spiritual successor to In Through the Outdoor to me, and it really does feel like more of a compilation of all kinds of different periods of them. As much as it is cool to hear one last group of songs with John Bonham on it and the 4 of them playing together, it's just not a real album to me. I understand some people want to consider it, some people want to rank it. That's fine. You want to leave those rankings with Coda included below? That's awesome. There is songs that I really like off of it. And maybe I'll just tease you all and give you like where I would put it in there after we're done. But anyway, carrying on. At number 8, at the very bottom of Led Zeppelin's albums, we got 1. Led Zeppelin 1. You know, with the old flamin' blimp on it. You know, Pete Townsend said that the band was going to go down like a Led Zeppelin, that they were never going to get anywhere. At least that's what I think that he meant by that. If he meant that in any sort of good way, I mean, that's fucking completely over my head. But yeah, he said they were going to sink like a Led Zeppelin, and I don't know why he said that, because pretty much everybody in the band was already successful before Led Zeppelin. I mean, you had like Jimmy Page in the Yardbirds and doing countless session work with like the Stones and all kinds of people, and same with John Paul Jones, worked with Rolling Stones, fucking Robert Plant. I think John Bonham was with Plant in the Band of Joy before Zeppelin. So they were already going places. They were already the talk of the UK scene and the rock scene in general. So I think if Zeppelin hadn't even have happened, I think that the four of them as musicians probably still would have gone on to have been at least legendary session players, if not like just legends anyway. So anyway, it's kind of a premise to one, I guess. So going off my notes here, it's in your face right off the bat. The sound quality and rough around the edges, like tone kind of suits the old blues record like nature of it. Like it kind of sounds like a blues record from the 30s or 40s or 50s. Ever so slightly. Obviously, it has like a bit of the production quality of the time. Maybe not as cleaned up as like, you know, Abbey Road or something that came before Beggar's Banquet even, or something like that. But yeah, I think they were going for that on purpose on there, like trying to make it sound like an old Muddy Waters record or Howlin' Wolf or something. A lot of Zeppelin's signature styles are showcased off the bat. Not all of them, but many staples of the variety of songs included on later albums are here. And as blues-centric as it is, it still has a couple of surprises of ballads and heavy rockers, and a guitar instrumental. The flow of the album is paced nicely, with all of that being said. The only element of the mixing I'm not keen on is the vocals. Sorry. Great performances, and I get the vibe they're going for. It's just a little abrasive in the mix at times. Like, I didn't really listen to these through headphones this time, to be honest with you. I kind of listened to them full blast in my face, and yeah, it's just when I listened to this one, the vocals struck me as like being the worst like produced thing on this album. And I get what it is, you know, like it's just, you know, if I'm gonna compare all these albums, obviously Robert Plant's vocal performances and the way that they're in the mix get way better from here. The bass could be louder, but again, the performances are amazing, so there's not much to complain about. A lot of Jimmy's leads here are pretty abrasive in the mix as well, too, and I know that's because he did his like signature wah pedal thing, where he had like that modified wah pedal, where he would just like leave it pressed up all the way, and it would give him that treble boost. So it kind of like adds to like why it sounds the way it is. And I can't help but love the guitar, all of the guitar work on here for its unique tones and ferocity because of that tone as well, that wah pedal pushed up tone. Kind of just gives it a unique sound. I don't think there's ever been guitar work that has sounded quite like it ever since. Zeppelin 1 definitely proves every member's skill and their chemistry together. Like John Bonham, I mean, like right off the bat on Good Times, Bad Times, he's already incorporating that thing that you know him for, which is that broken, one-footed triplet pattern. Those broken triplets, you know, it just gives you that like on there, like just so many moments that show how good they are going to be from this point on. You know, their skills and chemistry together is so tight, and they hold no shots at taking their ascendancy into popularity from this point on. I know it doesn't sound like I had a whole lot of bad to say about the album, but you're going to notice that with ranking a lot of these. Like, it's like splitting hairs. Some bands, it's like splitting hairs because they didn't change too much, but the quality of recordings and the batch of songs themselves kind of differ from album to album. And while I will give Zeppelin 1 its credit for kind of keeping the same vibe and stuff for most of it, that old bluesy sound like I was talking about, just raw, dark, gritty. You know, there's enough here, like the little raga Black Mountainside, piece that Jimmy Page put together on here. There's a couple moments, like Dazed and Confused is a little, like psychedelic, kind of heavy metal, a little bit, Communication Breakdown, too. Not to give away too much about how much I enjoy certain songs. I try not to do that so much on here if you haven't noticed. Leave that for my top 10 songs. But, I'd be remiss to say that this album isn't so one note. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. And it is pretty cohesive. I just don't enjoy the sound of it as much. That's why it's at the bottom. Alrighty. Now this next one, this is probably one of the biggest surprises so far for me as far as my personal ranking, because I've ranked my favorite Zeppelin albums, from the time that I started getting really into them. I thought I had a grasp on what I considered my favorite and whatnot, but you never know when you go to do these YouTube videos and stuff and you really try to analyze certain elements of them and try to pick it apart. You start to notice things that maybe puts it down or raises it up a little more. And in this case, it raised it down, because I swear this was like my number 2. Maybe number 3 for a while. But at number 7, I have Zeppelin 3. I know, some people are probably like, what? How could you do that? But hear me out. It's their... Oh, fuck. I did it again. Oh, my God. So, Zeppelin 1, sorry. I gave 4 out of 5 stars, at the bottom. Obviously, it's at the bottom with 4 out of 5, so what's that telling you about Zeppelin and their catalog? Pretty perfect. Anyway, at 7, we got number 3 at 4 out of 5 stars. My reasoning... It's their most folk-oriented album. They have taken on their medieval Tolkien-esque side of their sound that is generally associated with their acoustic songs. There's a few rockers, though, that rank among some of their heaviest and grooviest, for sure. Even with the album having a lot of acoustic ballad-like material all throughout, there is loads more experimentation and genre variation than ever before. The pacing is pretty front-loaded with more upbeat material and can get pretty sleepy in the back half. As beautiful as some of the acoustic songs towards the end are, I mean, not to take away from the actual song quality themselves, it's just about the pacing. Jimmy's lead work seems to be much more reserved throughout this album. Still plenty of solos and cool overdub trickery and moments here, but it seems to be less about how many notes he can play super fast, and more about how they will truly fit in the mix and complement a song and make it stand out. It's not just like, I Can't Quit You, Babe, where he's just sitting there trying to be like, you know what I mean? He can do that stuff, and I don't think people give Jimmy a lot of credit as much for, like, inventing the whole, like, shred, like, style of guitar playing as much as he did. But yeah, pretty great work. Can't take away from any of that. It's just there seems to be less solos. Like, some of the songs don't even have a guitar solo on here, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that he went from being like a show-offy guitar player to being a really tasteful one. Maybe just a little better than George Harrison and like coming up with his interesting styles, but I think it's similar to George Harrison at some point, like where he would try to just create something that really added the aesthetic, or he was just playing all the right notes in the right places, nothing out of place. Let's get back here. So lots of odd production choices throughout that I guess was the goal, to get it to sound very analog sounding, to get a lot of those acoustic songs sounding the way that they do. But leaving the squeak and John Bonham's pedal is an odd imperfection for them to do. And some of Jimmy's acoustic tones, especially the with the slide on his guitar, can be pretty abrasive. I do kind of like the vibe and ambiance that both of these mistakes add, in spite of them probably turning a lot of people off from the mixes. I mean, I remember, when I was a teenager, and fans of Zeppelin would, like, critique the Since I've Been Loving You squeak in the pedal. I mean, it is what it is. Like, once you hear these things, you're not going to be able to unhear them. Sure, I get that, but it doesn't really ruin the vibe or the quality of the song. I just have to try and block it out, because you know, I really enjoy all of the songs that happens on, and just to hear that little in there is kind of like, it's kind of like a buzzkill for sure, but it really doesn't take away, because they're also playing great, right? It just kind of seems like a live room recording, and I really don't understand why they didn't take that out, or they didn't notice it or something. I don't know. I really don't understand it, but it is what it is. At times, the vocals aren't in the mix the best here, and get unnecessarily loud compared to everything else, especially when Robert ascends in range. And that's a pretty similar complaint to the first album. They just aren't... There's some times where it is that gritty, old blues record kind of sound to his vocals on here, especially on some of the acoustic songs. But for the most part, it's like pretty standard Zeppelin mixing. It's just that, you know, they seem like to be right in the front. And I kind of prefer everything to be a pretty balanced level, whereas his stuff, like, just seems to be soaring above all the rest. John Paul Jones's bass is getting tighter and tastier here, but like the debut, it isn't as prominent as I prefer in the mix. I do really enjoy the hypnotic vibe and kind of psychedelic, if dare I say, like, entrancing, like, kind of vibe a lot of these songs have. They just have that swirling atmosphere, like pretty much all of them do, like whether it be like Friends, Gallows Pole, Tangerine. They all kind of have this swirling essence. Since I've Been Loving You, That's the Way, all good stuff. But yeah, some similar complaints to one here as far as the mixing and all that, and like the pacing of the album. You know, like I said, it's like front loaded with a lot of bangers, and then in the back it's like a lot of sleepers. But they're all great songs. For me to say that any of these songs aren't essential is ridiculous. The only one to me that feels like sort of not essential is Hats Off to Roy Harper, but even that is interesting in its own right. I mean, they didn't go back and do anything like that again, so it is what it is. You know, some people are going to disagree with me there about that being ranked so low, just because of the qualities of the songs themselves, but it really comes down to the production and the pacing, and that's what causes me to split hairs with some of these albums that are ranked low. Okay. Get back to my list here. At number 6, another freaking surprise for me. Which, I guess it's a surprise. I mean, at the end of the day, I know Zeppelin's material in and out. And I know they only have 8 albums. So to rank some of them above the others would be kind of preposterous. But damn, I thought I enjoyed 3 a lot more. And I thought I enjoyed this one a lot more than I did before, but guess not. So at number 6, we have Presence. Bumping it up a little bit. We got 4.5 out of 5 stars. You know, pretty solid. We're already at the 3rd album in on the ranking here, and we're already bumping up to 4.5. What? So, sorry about my scratchy throat. I've kind of been sick over the last couple weeks here. Kind of been practicing a lot with my band Raul and the Dukes, too. Got a big, like, 4-hour show coming up, so, like, I apologize if I'm, like, sniffling and scratchy and shit. Trying to work through it. Anyway. Presence. A pretty perfectly mixed album. Definitely their most straightforward hard rock release. Every song on here is very riff-centric, and all of the riffs are very snaky and complex, to where all of the instrumentation together creates lots of interesting feels. Aside from T for One, every song is a heavy rocker, and that one's basically just a redo of Since I've Been Loving You with like a different intro riff. The intro riff feels like it belongs on this album, but the rest of it just feels like Since I've Been Loving You Part 2. Anyway, there's still a bit of the funky grooves from the previous album still present, and of course, their take on the blues and rockabilly. So you got a little bit of different styles coming on. They've always done the blues, obviously, but maybe not so much in that straight up like Elvis, Chuck Berry kind of rockabilly style. So that's kind of cool to see on here. While the heaviness is definitely felt, there is a certain playfulness and fun atmosphere to presence. Once again, everything has hit that sweet spot in the mix to where it's balanced perfectly and super cohesive from song to song. Like, none of the songs feel out of place from one another at all. It's not a complete turn-off, but Jimmy's guitar is a bit out of tune in a few spots where it creates some ugly dissonance. And again, just like the keeping in of John Bonham's squeaky bass pedal, I just don't understand why they would have left this in here. Maybe they just didn't have a guitar tuner on hand or something, or they just didn't give a fuck. Maybe they're just too fucked up. Anyway, it's hard to complain with all of the amazing performances on every song, though. Some of his solos here may be a little sloppily executed too, but honestly, I dig the raunchy character that it adds. It seems like it's supposed to be a raunchier, like I said, more bluesy album, so I guess that kind of makes sense. Again, the drums keep getting more inventive and crazier here. Like, just think about those crazy little offbeat breaks and fucking Nobody's Fault But Mine, you know? What the hell is that? Like that boom, bam, boom, bum, ba-da-da-dum, like that. What the hell? Like, how did he come up with that shit? You know, and like Achilles' Last Stand, it's just those like Iron Maiden, like galloping fucking drums and bass. Like, boom, ba-da-da-da-da. It's just so nuts, dude. So everything's so ahead of their time for them, really. Less keyboard on here, almost at all. I'm like having trouble thinking of many keyboard moments on here at all. John Paul Jones does make up for it with some awesome bass work that adds more off-kilter textures to the grooves here. Like, it all kind of is like interwoven with a lot of these songs. Robert's vocals are once again on point for every song, and none of them sounds like he was like sick or something like that on the previous album. Overall, probably their most samey album, though. Samey in quotes there, because it's hard to say that a lot of these songs sound exactly the same. They all got such unique riffs and kind of grooves in them and stuff, and they're all different songs, obviously. It's not like the Ramones or AC/DC or something like that, but yeah, it's just when you're comparing it to the rest of their albums, there is like little to no variation with genres on here, and them trying new things. It's a lot of the same. There's less variation than ever before, but for what it is, it's nearly perfectly executed, I should say, on there. Because, yeah, aside from, like, Jimmy's guitar being slightly out of tune on a couple songs, it's, like, honestly, everything's pretty up to par on here. It's just, the reason it is as low as it is for me here is because I just don't take a lot of these songs away from it with me. All are still pretty essential Zeppelin tracks to me. There's just not as much variation, and to be honest, what I like about Zeppelin, as you'll see later, is just the loads of variation they put in genres and experimentation on their albums. And Presence just doesn't really have it. You know, it's all pretty one note for the most part. Not like literally one note. One note as in like, it's like, you know, it's one-dimensional in its execution anyway, I guess I should have said. Alrighty, so this next one, probably gonna piss some people off. The guy's probably gonna turn the video off right here. It is what it is. I've always kind of had this album in particular at this place. Never really, like a lot of people are quick to put this one at number one. I don't get it. I never will get it. So, at number 5, we got Zeppelin 4. I know, everybody's like, what? Okay, so we got 4.5 out of 5 stars here. Same star ranking as Presence. Now hear me out why this is where it is, okay? Like, I got reasons. There's not as much experimentation with genres on here as there is with 3. It's as though they took all of their strengths from the first 3 records and brought the songwriting skills up a notch. A good balance between the rockers and ballads. The pacing is strong. The back half can get pretty breezy, but each song is still so compelling, really. As strong as each track is, I do feel that none of their mixes seem to belong together on this album. It gives each track its own character, like kind of in a similar sense to like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, where every song is kind of like its own person, like its own element here. But really, it doesn't make it feel too cohesive. I guess nothing is terribly wrong with the mixes on each song per se, they just don't blend together. The bass, oh god, wrote in like this shitty gold marker that was fading out here, so I apologize. The bass is the main thing that could be louder on a few tracks. It's also the way the guitars and the drums were recorded and leveled as well. It does feel like their most artistic album up to this point in their career because of the stuff they chose to include on here. You can feel they're wanting to take their direction wherever the hell they feel like it at the time. Something that holds true for the succeeding albums after this. They're just bringing their strongest lot of songs at that time, it seems to me. Like, it wasn't like they were trying to be like, oh, let's do the folk album, or let's do the blues album, or let's do the psychedelic album. They were just like, we got these 8 songs here. They all are like the best ones we have at the time, so that's what y'all are getting. And nothing wrong with that. We get so much good material here. All of the performances here are top-notch as usual. And, oh, God, I hate this thing I wrote in, man. It's like, and while the mixes vary, it's still an excellent wild ride of an album. It does very much take you on a journey. It's just where it is because I don't feel like the songs blend together. When you listen to one track, even from Black Dog to Rock and Roll right off the bat, they just feel like they're from different albums, from different sessions to me. So as an album as a whole, compared to Zeppelin's other albums, I just don't feel like it stacks up like as being as strong of a statement. So it did establish a lot of firsts for them. They came up with their symbols that were become iconic for them on this album. I know some people call it the Symbols album, or no title, whatever you want to call it. It's still a good album. It just sits in the middle of their discography for me, and it's kind of a stepping stone album. They only got better from there for me. Okay, number 4. This is one hasn't really moved much in my ranking. Probably would have been in the same spot from back then, because I do really enjoy this one a lot. But at number 4, we have the final album, In Through the Outdoor. 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's a practical conclusion. Everything from the previous albums coalesces here, though this is actually the most experimental that they have gotten to on all ends. There's pretty much a different approach being taken on each song, whether it's choosing a different guitar or tone on the guitar or amp, or different pedals, adding more ambient layering, different synthesizers, or adding auxiliary percussion. They have taken full reign on most of Jimmy's guitar work, especially the distorted tones, have gotten way dirtier than ever. And it seems like he is either way too fucked up to play to perfection, or it is purposely done so to make it sound rawer. I do really, once again, enjoy all of the playing from everyone. Even Robert, who by this point in his career does sound more so aged, and perhaps the closest you're going to get to in the Zeppelin catalog to him sounding like his current voice that everyone knows him for, like going into his solo stuff and projects beyond. It blows my mind that I never noticed how many songs have Bonham's bass pedal squeak in it, though. Like on All My Love, like, again, it doesn't ruining the listening experience wholly for me, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it, and, like, for it to be in some of my favorite songs just kind of, like, blows my mind that I never really, like, paid attention to notice that. Like, I just was so encapsulated with the vibe of the song itself, I guess, and the guitar, maybe. There's still quite a bit of joy and playfulness, like on Presence here, but some of the songs do harken on nostalgic and melancholic moods, as if they subconsciously knew this was their swan song. All puns intended there, really. It really is a hell of a way to go out, and truly does feel like the final form of everything leading up to it. So, yeah, kind of similar to 4 in that way. Like, where it's like they kind of like took all of their sounds that they were establishing and made so unique to them, and just were like, how can we just do this a notch better and more different than before? So yeah, loving Through the Outdoor, man. Such a crazy album to go out on. Like, there's just so much going on with that, so much to unpack. So cool, though. So many of their most underrated songs are easily on that album, no doubt. So, moving on. At number 3, perhaps this is going to be controversial, because I know a lot of people, this is number 1 for them. A lot of critics have always said this is the best. Maybe you know where I'm going with this. Number 3 is 2. Led Zeppelin 2 at 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's only a tad different in production to 1, but everything is mixed to much more refinement than before. It is a clear step up to the debut in all ways. The foundation of blues rock is still very present, but there is other stronger influences of psychedelia, folk, and hard rock here. The thing with the vocals being too brash on the first album is fixed here, like, entirely. In fact, I think every instrument it just sounds pristine. The bass is at an optimal volume. Jimmy still has some of the same tones as before, like some of them screechy kind of tones, but they're much more subdued, and he starts doing more of what I like to call his magical leads, or his tones, be that with some production trickery, the use of a 12-string, or maybe just a touch of reverb in certain places to just make it sing a little more, carry out a little longer. The organ on here is much more elegant and tastier. Like, the lines are utilized a little more sparingly, but a lot better. And obviously, Thank You is like a huge standout for the organ on here. Your Time Is Gonna Come on the first album is pretty standout with the organ, but there's still not much of it. Like, a lot of the songs on here have organ and keyboard on them, so... And they all really make a good impact on the songs they're on. All of the guitar riffs on here obviously are very memorable and are such staples of rock guitar music. How Could You Live Without a Whole Lot of Love, or Heartbreaker, What Is and What Should Never Be, the Lemon Song, shit, Bring It On Home. They're all great. Moby Dick. They all have such fucking awesome guitar riffs that every guitar player should really know how to play. And, like, I'm not even bullshitting about you, not even trying to gatekeep there. If you ain't learning the riffs on Zeppelin 2 on guitar, what the hell are you really doing on your instrument? Come on. So, anyway. The flow, be it with as much variation as it has, it leaves you wondering what it'll hit you next with. Like, you know, like you know that the songs are going to be different here, and they blend so well, but you don't know what's coming next. And especially when you get to the album, you're just like, dang, what's the next album going to be? Supposing you don't know their stuff at all. Like, I was trying to listen to this without rose-colored glasses on and trying to experience it for the first time, so to speak. Obviously, that's impossible to do, but or you know, a foreigner wouldn't have wrote the song feels like the first time. But you know, it's just like you don't know what's going to happen next for them. And I imagine at the time that these were coming out, like, you were just, every fan of them was just on the edge of their seat waiting for the next album. It all blends so well, and it's such a seamless flow too, as different as it all is. There's just like this haze about the production on here. It has this very mystical sort of energy and vibe about it. And their youthful energy is still very much in full display here. You know, obviously they would mature a lot, like pretty much after Zeppelin 4, or maybe Houses of the Holy. But here, you know, it's still very much young guys, young dudes in a band trying to get together and make some very encapsulating rock music that broke ground for its time. Moving on, hopefully you all are still watching after me putting Zeppelin 2 at the 3rd spot. You gotta hear me out here, though, because these two albums above have always been my favorite. Their spots have not changed at all throughout my history of them being at my top after I was younger and listened to all the Zeppelin albums. Yeah, these ones, they just couldn't budge. I couldn't let them budge at all. I even tried to, like, listen to them and find things that I could pit against the other albums, but I just still enjoyed them way more. So, at number 2, we got Physical Graffiti at 4.5 out of 5 stars. Ooh, they've all kind of been 4.5 up to this point, huh? Like, am I going to get to 5? Let's see. Does Zeppelin have a perfect album to me? Let's see. Physical Graffiti, though, at number 2. A very solid double album. It is pretty long, especially compared to any of their other albums. And there isn't a song or moment on here that I don't enjoy, though. Most of the track list does have that classic hard rock Zeppelin sound that they're known for, but of course, it has plenty of variation on it with a few of the 15 tracks. A very raw mix throughout. It's kind of like they just took what session they could get on some of these, maybe because they were trying to cram recording this plethora of material into their tight schedules. With that being said, it makes for much more experimental vocal approaches from Robert. His voice particularly affected, like it has laryngitis or something at the time. It definitely gives him a gruffer, almost like proto-grunge sound at the time. Like, his voice just sounds very scratchy and scraggly, and it's, you know, maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but I really think it adds to the way that some of these songs are performed. Again comes the return of Bonham's squeaky bass pedal on a few songs. Is playing in the mix of the drums of these albums only seems to get better and more interesting, though. So it's hard to knock him for just having that. I don't think that was really his issue anyways. Obviously, whoever produced the album could have told them, like, hey, you got this squeaky pedal on here. Maybe you should redo some of the drum tracks. I don't know. Maybe that's a good idea. But didn't happen, obviously, as history will tell it. So, for it being such a long album, it is very well paced. Not a moment where I'm bored or getting sleepy on here. It seems John Paul Jones' use of different keyboards has fully taken hold of most of the track list for once. This is probably the album where there is the most use of keyboards in a general sense. So many new synths being utilized for the time. I mean, it's probably their overall most funky album, too. And I'm not just talking about Trampled Underfoot, with it being like a straight-up funk song. It's just like every song has the funk in here to a certain point. There is a groove to it. A lot of the grooves accent a lot of the off beats and have that off-kilter feel, which, yes, is something that Zeppelin is known for doing, but they really embraced the styles that were going on at the time. Every song on here is pretty up there in my favorites, so it's hard to go wrong with literally any of the tracks on here. Even a couple songs that are underrated, like Boogie with Stu or Black Country Woman or something like that. Yeah, they're all still keepers, and yeah, that, as much as it sounded like I probably had, like, some complaints, like with Robert being sick and them leaving in the squeaky bass pedal and whatnot, but all the songs are so good here. Like, seriously, more than pretty much songs on any of their other albums. It's amazing. Not many double albums are able to capture my attention like this. I'm not a huge fan of double albums, but Physical Graffiti is definitely up there in the top 5 or 10 at least. So, yeah, no doubt. Number 2 for me. Moving on to number 1. Always been my number 1. Anyone who knows me should know this. For a while, it was in my top 10 albums of all time, period. So it might still be. We'll see after we get through a lot of material on this channel. We'll see if that still holds true. But yeah, anyway, without further ado, hopefully you've been paying attention. Number 1 is Houses of the Holy with 5 out of 5 stars. Oh, did I say it? I said it. I said I gave it a perfect score. Oh my god, so Houses of the Holy, perfect score album for me. Now, does that mean that the album is objectively perfect? No. Does that mean that there maybe isn't things about it that could have been improved on? No. It's just about my enjoyment of it, and where I feel they progressed to this point in their career, and also just the impact that it had on me at a young age, you know, influencing me to take on different styles of music and incorporate kind of my own essence into them. So anyway, my notes. It's such a digestible album for me. Obviously, the track list has a lot of variation from song to song, but the whole album has this special mystical aura to it that kind of gives it this dreamlike sort of quality, sort of similar to like something the Beatles would have been going on with Sgt. Pepper or Magical Mystery Tour or something like that. It just has that sort of vibe, like where if you put it on, it's like you're at this place, you know, you're in that mystical alien looking landscape that the album cover like puts you in. It's very strange. I don't really know how to describe it other than saying it like that, because it does feel that way. Similar to 4, in that some songs are like upgraded versions of styles they had previously established, just done a tad bit better and with more finesse and more creativity. There's much more experimentation with genres than 4, though. Every song feels like it comes from a completely different influence, but at the end of the day, they all have that Zeppelin touch. The only flaw I could even find in the album, again, is the return of the squeak of John Bonham's godforsaken kick pedal on the ocean. And that's one song. Other than that, every element of this album works for me. It is damn near perfection. All of Jimmy's guitar work has gotten to that magical sounding vibe that I brought up that they had on 2. A lot of his leads, man, like, goddamn, especially, like, on Song Remains the Same and No Quarter, shit, like, more than that, like, even the arrangement of the Rain song itself, it just is so magical and mystical. so hard to explain, like, what it is about it. It's just certain choices and the production of it, I think, make it seem that way to me, like it came from another world. Some of the solos really take me to some other world, as I was saying, and it's just like maybe a nostalgic thing, like, you know, maybe hearing these on like road trips or something like that always just brings me back to those road trips and just kind of picturing these like pastoral like kind of landscapes and stuff, and like put you there. Maybe it's the attachment to the J.R.R. Tolkien like sort of mythology that people draw to them. I don't know what it is. It is, you'd have to listen to it and see if you hear that yourself. Every song is more cohesively mixed together than on 4, because they, like on 4, they all kind of come from different places musically, influentially, but the mixes seem like they were produced in the same session and come from the same, I know they were all produced probably by the same producer, but like they all went through the same process at least. I love the even deeper exploration into more complicated meter changes, like time signature fuckery in each song here too. Whether that was ever preconceived by them intentionally or not, I don't know if John Bonham ever thought like, hey, let's do 1 bar of fucking 9 here and do another of 4 and another of 5 and another of 7. You know what I mean? Whether he was thinking in terms like that, I'm not really sure. But it definitely came off as if they did, because their songs are so hard to replicate, mainly because the drums are so offbeat and ever so changing like half the time. Every song is just a classic and an essential track to know on here to me. They're all just goddamn so perfect. I know a lot of people have gripes with the Crunge and Disher Maker, but while those aren't the strongest in their whole catalog, I do think that they add to the album's experience, and they're definitely standout tracks. Like, I don't think that they never did things like that really again, and they're not terrible to me. I don't see the Crunge as just being some cash grab at funk, you know, like I don't know. It's just a silly song. Like, Disher Maker maybe isn't so much of a silly song. It's a nice love song, just in that reggae vein. Has a great solo. Just simple. But the Crunge, it's not offensive to me. I don't understand how people see it as offensive. It's just a silly song. You know, he's got that, where's that confounded bridge line in it. Everyone loves that. It's hilarious. Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't do as much for me, you know, as maybe some of my other favorite songs, but against those two, you got some of the best songs ever written, so I don't know. You know, like I said, splitting hairs here. But that's why these albums are ranked the way they are. If you disagree with me, let me know. If you don't disagree with me, if you agree with me, or you have a similar ranking, you know, let me know. I like to see other people's lists, you know. I watch other people's rankings on here as well, too. You know, so that's kind of how I got into this stuff, so always interested to know what the general public thinks of these artists. I hope you guys didn't completely unsubscribe from me from having, you know, like 1 or 3 or 4 or 2 low as I did. I don't know. Like, I know a lot of people really like those albums, but this is how I feel about it. This is my personal taste and how it impacts me as a musician and what I really want to listen to. So, yeah, without further ado, that concludes the Led Zeppelin album ranking. I hope you guys see me in the next video for my top 10 songs. Yeah, hopefully I can get everything uploaded in time. I got a big show to play, you know, here soon on March 11th, so I got a lot going on with that, but I'm still trying to get these done in the meantime and just keep cranking them out, you know. Hopefully I can get to a consistent pace on that, but, you know, just gonna try and take my time and do these as professionally as I can. So, yeah, to bring you quality entertainment of the musical variety. So yeah, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace and love.